The warlords of the HFY had ruled the Orion Arm for centuries, their dominion built on fear. Empires crumbled beneath the weight of their war fleets, civilizations vanished into silence, and every species that dared resist was shattered until they obeyed or ceased to exist. No rebellion lasted long, no defiance went unpunished. But when the HFY occupation reached a small human colony on the edge of the Perseus spiral, they made a mistake. A fatal one. They had crushed countless worlds before, believing humanity would be no different. And maybe they were right until they took the life of a human child. No one knows exactly how it started. Some say it was an accident. A HFY patrol enforcing curfew, a child running in the wrong direction. Others claim it was deliberate, a calculated show of force meant to remind humans of their place. But the truth didn't matter. The moment that child's life was taken, something changed. The air itself seemed to shift. The broadcasts fell silent. The colony, once beaten, exhausted, and compliant, became something else. And then the retaliation began. At first, the HFY barely noticed. A supply depot burned. A patrol vanished without a trace. They had seen insurgencies before, and they had crushed them all. But this wasn't an insurgency. This was something else. The humans did not strike blindly. They did not run. They did not beg. Every attack was calculated, precise. Communications were severed. Supply chains collapsed. Ships docked in orbit exploded in eerie synchrony, their systems hijacked by something the HFY had never encountered before: human cyber warfare. Their soldiers reported shadows moving in the dark, voices whispering in their own tongue over hijacked comms, the sound of human breathing just behind them before the lights cut out. The HFY responded the way they always had: overwhelming force. More ships, more troops, orbital bombardments meant to turn the colony into dust. But the bombs never landed. Missile batteries hidden in the mountain ranges spat fire into the skies, tearing apart warships that had never before known fear. Their soldiers advanced into city streets only to find them abandoned, empty until they weren't. The humans fought like no species had ever fought before. Not for land, not for power, but for something deeper. Something terrifying. And then the message came. Broadcasted across every HFY frequency, overriding their encrypted channels, playing on every screen aboard their command ships. A single sentence. You took one of ours. Now we take everything. And for the first time in their long reign, the warlords of the HFY felt it. A cold, suffocating realization creeping into their bones. They had ruled by fear for centuries. But now, they were about to learn what it meant to be afraid. The HFY warlords had no word for vengeance. Their empire was built on ruthless efficiency, on domination through sheer, unrelenting force. They crushed enemies before they could dream of resistance. They had no need for the concept of revenge until now. Because what was happening on the human colony was not war. It was not rebellion. It was a reckoning. Their high command received reports that defied logic. Elite squads vanished without a trace, their final transmissions nothing but static and panicked breathing. Entire command centers were hijacked, their security overrides useless as human voices whispered threats directly into the warlords' ears. Supply ships bound for the fleet's core worlds detonated from within, sabotaged with precision that suggested deep, intimate knowledge of HFY systems. It was impossible. Humanity was a fledgling species on the galactic stage, primitive compared to the HFY's centuries-old technology. They should have been helpless. And yet, every attempt to reassert control was met with something far worse than defiance: calculated, merciless retaliation. The humans weren't just resisting. They were dismantling the HFY's war machine piece by piece. And behind it all, there was a name whispered through intercepted transmissions, a figure the warlords could not track, could not predict: Commander Elias Voss. Before the invasion, Voss had been stationed on the colony as an advisor, one of many military officials helping humanity's expansion efforts. He had spent years studying HFY tactics, analyzing the weaknesses in their seemingly invincible fleet. When the warlords arrived, Humanity had been outmatched, forced to bow their heads to avoid annihilation. Voss had been powerless. But then they took the child. And something inside him, inside every human on that colony, snapped. They called it the Silent War. The HFY controlled the skies, their warships still vast and overwhelming, but the ground belonged to the humans. Entire cities turned into labyrinths of death. Subways became ambush points, communication hubs became traps. Factories that had once produced mining equipment were now churning out drones silent, undetectable, and programmed to tear apart the HFY's most advanced tech from the inside. The warlords scrambled for answers, demanding to know how a backwater colony could possibly outmaneuver them. But there was no logic in it, because the HFY could not understand what they had awakened. And then an even deeper horror set in. The humans were no longer broadcasting messages of defiance. They were broadcasting silence. Every transmission, every intercepted signal, every HFY command channel was met with the same chilling void. The warlords had assumed it was a failure of their surveillance systems. Until one of their ships, a Dreadnought-class battlecruiser, received a single, untraceable message. It was the voice of a human child. "I see you." The ship vanished from all records 3 minutes later. No distress signal, no wreckage, no explanation. And at that moment, the HFY finally understood. Humanity was no longer fighting to survive. They were hunting. The HFY warlords gathered in the core command chamber of their flagship, the Vextaran, their forms towering over the holotable. For the first time in centuries, they did not argue over conquest or tribute, they argued over survival. Their empire had stretched across the stars unchallenged for generations. Yet now, in a remote system barely worth a footnote in their archives, they were being outmaneuvered, outmatched, and outthought. It was unthinkable. A species they had dismissed as weak, a civilization that should have crumbled the moment the warships arrived, was dismantling their dominion one calculated strike at a time. High Warlord Zarath's mandibles clicked with barely restrained fury. He slammed a clawed hand on the table, silencing the others. "You tell me this is the work of one man? A human officer leading a band of survivors? Lies. We are facing something far worse." His eyes flickered to the sensor data from their most recent losses. Entire patrols wiped out without a single energy discharge recorded. Ships compromised by unknown viruses that infiltrated even their most encrypted networks. Battle reports that spoke of shadows moving within their own ranks. On the surface, the humans pressed their advantage. Voss had studied the HFY long before the war began, and now he was exploiting every weakness. Where the warlords relied on brute force, humans used deception, misinformation, and surgical precision. They didn't fight where the enemy expected them to, they struck in ways the warlords couldn't predict. Power grids collapsed moments before key assaults. Shield generators failed just as human forces advanced. Even the HFY's own war drones turned against them, hijacked by human programmers operating from underground bunkers deep beneath the ruined cities. But the war was not without cost. Voss knew that while they had the element of surprise, humanity was still outgunned. The colony's defenders were stretched thin, and every battle took a toll. Supplies dwindled. Communications beyond the system had been severed. The other human colonies, those still under the illusion of peace, had no idea what was happening here. And then there was the growing divide among humanity itself. Admiral Renata Keene, stationed on Earth's Strategic Command, had received the reports in fragmented bursts. Transmissions smuggled past HFY blockades through relay ships that barely made it back. Officially, the United Human Systems were not at war with the HFY. Diplomatic channels were still open, albeit strained. The Terran Council feared that a full-scale declaration would bring destruction on an unprecedented level. And yet, here was proof that the HFY had no intention of peace. The debate tore through the council chambers. Do they commit their fleets to the fight, risking total annihilation, or do they leave the colony to burn in hopes of buying time? But there was another question, one that no one dared ask aloud. How had Voss and his people lasted this long against an enemy that should have buried them in the first days? There were rumors, whispers of something ancient buried beneath the colony, something older than humanity itself. And worse still, there were signs that not all the HFY warlords were united in their desire to crush humanity. Somewhere in the darkness, a betrayal was already unfolding. And then the impossible happened. A human warship, a Terran frigate thought lost during the early days of the occupation, appeared on long-range sensors, emerging from the shadows of a dead moon. The Sovereign had been presumed destroyed, its crew dead. But now, it was broadcasting a message on every open channel. We have returned. Do not trust the Council. The war has already begun. The HFY listened. So did the Terran leadership. And in that moment, the fragile balance shattered. Voss stood at the command console of the underground operations hub, watching as tactical overlays flickered across the dimly lit room. The air smelled of sweat, metal, and exhaustion. The colony's defenders were stretched to the limit, running on adrenaline and sheer defiance, but it wasn't enough. The Sovereign's broadcast had shattered the fragile illusion of containment now. War was inevitable. And humanity was on the losing side. The HFY had responded with overwhelming force. Their blockade tightened, their warships blotting out the sky like a gathering storm. Thousands of pulse signatures burned across the planet's upper atmosphere as dropships descended in coordinated waves. This wasn't just another occupation force, this was annihilation. The warlords had stopped trying to conquer. They wanted to erase the colony from existence. Voss's voice was steady, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. We hold them here, or we lose everything. There's no retreat, no reinforcements. His officers exchanged grim looks, but no one objected. They had all known, deep down, that no help was coming. Then the alarm screamed. The war map shifted, icons flashing red as new contacts surged into the system. But they weren't HFY. The Council had finally made its decision. 3 Terran battlecruisers emerged from the void, their hulls battle-scarred but defiant. The Resolution, the Iron Tide, the Vanguard. Titans of humanity's fleet, each bristling with railguns, plasma lances, and shielding tech the warlords had dismissed as primitive. They weren't enough to turn the tide not against an entire empire, but they sent a message. Humanity was no longer waiting. The HFY fleet hesitated. For the first time, they saw humans not as scattered survivors, but as a force that could not be ignored. But hesitation was not surrender. Within seconds, the warlords issued their reply in orbital bombardment. The ground trembled as fire rained from above, turning city blocks into molten ruin. Bunkers cracked. Defenses failed. And then the real horror struck. The enemy had changed tactics. Instead of targeting only military infrastructure, they were targeting energy relays, medical centers, even civilian evacuation routes. This wasn't war, it was extermination. And still, the colony fought back. Engineers rerouted power through emergency conduits, patching together shields with whatever scraps they could find. Pilots launched from hidden bays, flying into impossible odds, their outdated fighters weaving through HFY squadrons like knives through armor. Every single human who could hold a weapon took a stand. But Voss saw the numbers. It wasn't enough. The colony would fall within hours. Then, a new transmission cut through the chaos. Not from the fleet. Not from Earth. From below. A deep, ancient frequency, buried beneath the planet's surface, pulsing like a heartbeat. It bypassed encryption, infiltrated both human and HFY systems alike. And a single phrase echoed across every channel, in a voice neither human nor alien. Awakening protocols engaged. The war had just changed, but no one knew how. The pulse continued, vibrating through every system, disrupting sensors, destabilizing targeting arrays. Even the HFY warships hesitated, their formations breaking apart as their command networks flickered with interference. Humanity's forces weren't sure whether to feel hope or dread. The signal came from beneath their feet, from something buried deep within the planet. Voss's console flickered, then stabilized. The underground command hub had sealed itself off, responding to the frequency like a living thing. Warnings scrolled across the screens, error messages stacking up, but the core transmission remained, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then, something else came through. A data burst encrypted in ancient human dialects. It was old. Older than the colony, older than humanity's first steps beyond Earth. Elias, the colony's lead analyst, scrambled to decrypt it. His hands were shaking. This isn't HFY tech. This is ours. The words hit harder than the orbital bombardment. Humanity had believed itself young among the stars, a species clawing its way into relevance. But this was something else entirely. The transmission wasn't just an alert. It was a wake-up call. The ground beneath the colony trembled, deep tremors sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Voss steadied himself against the console as a new image appeared on screen. A structure buried beneath the planet's surface. Massive. Sleeper systems, hibernation bays, something waiting. And now it was waking up. But then the warning came. The Resolution's captain, barking through comms, voice strained. "Command, we've got inbound signatures." Not HFY. Not friendly. The feed jittered, struggling against interference. They just appeared. No jump signatures, no approach vectors. They're just here. Elias paled. That's impossible. It wasn't. The new ships were massive, unlike anything in human records. Dark, angular, absorbing the light around them like void-born predators. Not HFY. Not human. Something else. And they were broadcasting a single message over and over again. Containment breach detected. Purge protocols engaged. Voss felt a cold weight settle in his gut. The buried structure hadn't just sent a distress call, it had summoned something. Something that now saw them all human, HFY, everyone as a threat to be erased. The colony had been fighting for survival against an empire. Now, they were caught in the middle of something far worse. And then, the first black ship opened fire. The first shots from the black ships cut through the void like razors of unmaking. They didn't just destroy, they erased, leaving behind nothing but a void in space where matter had once been. Human and HFY ships alike scattered in desperate evasive maneuvers, but the newcomers had no interest in picking sides. They were here for one purpose, to wipe everything from existence. Voss knew they had no time. The colony's defenses were still battered, and the HFY fleet, despite their earlier arrogance, was just as unprepared for this. The buried structure had been a warning, not a weapon. Something from humanity's past had been sealed away here, and now, the entities that had once done the sealing had returned to finish the job. Elias worked furiously at his console, sweat dripping from his brow. The structure's waking up faster now. It's linked to these things, maybe a command center, maybe something more. His fingers flew over the interface. We need to send a counter signal, now. Voss barely had time to process that, before alarms shrieked through the underground bunker. The black ships had altered their attack patterns, shifting, calculating. And now, their weapons were aiming directly at the surface. Above, the Resolution and her sister ships scrambled to intercept, flaring their engines to cut across the enemy's line of fire. The first blast struck, but human ships didn't simply die, they adapted. The Resolution's hull, covered in ablative plating, flared as it took the brunt of the attack, engines burning hot as it pushed forward. Another blast carved through its midsection, but it didn't stop. Humans didn't stop. On the ground, the tremors grew worse. The colony was shaking apart. Then, Elias let out a strangled gasp. "I found something. This isn't just a bunker. It's a lock." It was never meant to wake up. It was meant to keep something inside. Voss's stomach turned to ice. And we just opened it. A deep rumble echoed through the planet's crust. The buried structure shuddered as its ancient doors began to part, releasing a pulse so powerful it disrupted the black ships for the first time. Their movements faltered. For the briefest second, they hesitated. Then, something else woke up. From deep within the planet, an impossible energy signature surged upward. A force something beyond technology, beyond human or Vash'ar understanding. It struck outward, consuming the void-born ships, unraveling them at a molecular level. The black ships convulsed, their perfect formations collapsing as they twisted and warped, vanishing into nothingness. The pulse subsided. Silence. And then, a voice calm, ancient, and terrifying in its clarity spoke through every human and alien system. Containment failed. Reclamation protocol engaged. The ground cracked. The colony's sky darkened. Whatever had been locked away wasn't an enemy of the black ships. It was something worse. The world beneath them groaned as the last echoes of the pulse faded into silence. Voss braced himself against the shaking walls, his mind racing through what he had just witnessed. The black ships obliterated. Not by human hands, not even by the Vash'ar, but by something far older, something humanity had unknowingly kept buried for untold millennia. And now, it was awake. Elias stared at the display in stunned horror. The signal's still active. Whatever's down there, it's spreading. His voice was barely above a whisper. We need to leave. Now. Above, the Resolution limped through the shattered remnants of battle, its hull scorched and broken, but still moving. Humanity's fleet had suffered, but they had survived. Against the odds, against forces beyond understanding, they were still here. That had always been the defining trait of their species, not strength, not technology, but endurance. The Vash'ar, humbled and leaderless, drifted in scattered clusters. Some had already begun the retreat, their warships abandoning the battlefield they had once dominated. Others hesitated, watching the planet below as if they, too, feared what had been unleashed. Then the voice returned. Cold. Calculated. Reclamation proceeding. Species designation non-compliant. The sky darkened further, clouds twisting unnaturally, streaked with light that should not exist. The air itself felt charged, reality bending in unseen ways. Something vast and unfathomable had taken notice of them. Voss clenched his jaw, forcing his voice to steady. Elias, is there a way to stop it? A pause. Then, a slow nod. There's a fail-safe. I think the ones who built this place never intended for it to be used, but they left a back door. It'll take everything, every ship, every reactor, every ounce of power we can throw at it. If we overload the pulse with raw energy, we might be able to collapse the signal. He met Voss's gaze, eyes filled with quiet dread. But we won't survive it. The silence stretched. They had won against the Vash'ar. They had held the line against an enemy that had ruled through terror. They had proven that humanity was not to be underestimated. And yet, now, at the brink of victory, they stood against something far greater. Voss exhaled slowly. We send the order. Across the battered remains of the fleet, the message went out. There was no hesitation. One by one, human ships turned their weapons downward, targeting the structure that had saved them but threatened everything. Engines burned, reactors overloaded, every remaining ounce of power funneled into a final, desperate strike. The impact came like the birth of a new star. Light consumed the colony, the ruins, the sky itself. The signal flared twisted, then collapsed. And just like that, the impossible presence was gone. When the fire faded, only silence remained. The Resolution stood among the ruins, broken but intact. The last of the Vash'ar fled, their reign of fear shattered forever. Humanity had lost much, but they had proven one thing beyond all doubt. They were not to be ruled. They were not to be conquered. And they would never be broken.